Morning, Sydney. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Danny. Happy to do it.
Maybe I thought I'd dive straight in and just ask you a question. What do you see as the main difference between management and leadership?
There's a lot written on that, and there's a whole bunch of research trying to point out the difference and in the management literature, the business literature. But I think for the program, for the idea of enabling leadership, Danny, I think the main differences lie in the idea of compliance, restrictions, frames. Management is very much about repetition, replicability, reliability, reliable results, which requires frames and constrictions and bandwidths that you stick people in and want to have their performance remain within, so that it remains measurable and predictable, and that you can count your results. Leadership, particularly enabling leadership, perhaps would say, well, hang on, this is not about frames and compliance. This is about testing the limits of what others take for granted. This is about perhaps even pushing through these limits. And of course, in order to get any innovation, to get any novelty, you have to push through limits that everybody else takes for granted. I think the ability of enabling leadership is to at least look beyond those limits, perhaps not immediately enact it in some reckless fashion, but at least be able, within your leadership, to look beyond the limits that others take for granted. That to me is a key property. And so I think in another sense also, what we've seen a lot of is management very often is about the accountabilities and the accountabilities up into an organization to meet KPIs, to have other performance measures met. Whereas leadership ultimately comes down to an ethical responsibility for the people that you employ. And so, not that management doesn't, but the obsession with accounting and accountability and showing good figures up the hierarchy is not something that leaders and leadership necessarily should be associated with as a prime responsibility.
Thanks, Sydney. I think that's a very helpful framing. With that framing in mind, perhaps I could ask you what you see as the key leadership practices that will be required in order to bring something like the principles of safety differently to life.
I think, Danny, to be blunt about it, I think we got to be humble. We have to inspire humility in our leaders. Don't think you got all the answers. Be humble. Admit your own fallibility. Know that you can get it wrong, and be open about that. And understand that in doing that, there is a reciprocity, right? I may be wrong, but you may be wrong too, right? So let's certainly ask each other these questions. I think another really important investment to make for enabling leadership is understanding how work actually gets done, right? And not hiding behind these facades of how you think work gets done or how other people tell you that the work is imagined, right? No, really penetrate and try to understand how work actually gets done, how people create success on a daily basis, given the goal conflicts and constraints and all the other issues and obstacles that typically animate organizational life. If you don't understand how work actually gets done, there's no hope for you as a leader to improve any of it or to prevent serious trouble from coming your way. Part of that, I think, is an investment in trying to understand how things go well, because mostly things go well, right? So your people do a lot of things that actually work out really great. To think that is a result of their strict compliance with what your managers have told them to do is an illusion, absolute illusion. That doesn't work in the complex universe, doesn't work in the organization that you probably are leading. So try to understand what is responsible for those successes, those operational organizational successes that get created on a daily basis under your leadership. And so what we see is that people find ways around goal conflicts. They make some sacrifices. Some things matter, some things don't matter that much. If they don't matter that much, they may do them a little later, do them when they're back in the shack, right? Or whatever. And so these little trade-offs and these thousands of large and little decisions that people make on a daily basis are the creation of your safety and your organizational performance. That's what you got to understand and penetrate.